I actually I loved it when I was competing. So I started competing in 2006. That was my first contest, and it was so much fun when you would just bring your kids onto the field or onto the podium, and no one thought you were old enough to have kids.
Yeah.
And then they realized, oh yeah, I'm 10 years older than you, and
That's
wipe
awesome.
the floor with you. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't have kids, but yeah, I used to get people. I mean, even when I was in my 30s, like people would think that I was young. And yeah, everybody's always surprised when I tell them how old I am. I mean, especially because I don't compete with the Masters either. So,
Well, that would be one of the questions. Are you just waiting for the weight class separation in Masters?
no.
Not yet.
No, I've committed to never being a Masters.
Oh, no kidding.
I kind of feel like if I can't compete with the youngins anymore, it's time to just focus on, I don't know, short bar bending or something, grip sport.
As long as you're still doing something that's physically active, then all right. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I started Highland Games this summer too. So my goal is to go pro in Highland Games before I'm 50. So
excellent.
So there's that awesome. Too. So John's back. Let's start the show officially. So welcome to World Strongest Opinions, episode 48 with Lynn Morehouse of OSG, promoter extraordinaire. Welcome to the show, Lynn.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, welcome.
Yeah, dude, it's really awesome for you to come on. I know. I mean, we're less than 2 months out from OSG now. It's got to be getting busy.
This year has been more challenging in a number of ways than the previous years. And so, yeah, that countdown is pretty terrifying, to be honest, because there's still a lot of things on the to-do list. And that's not different than previous years. It's just that every year, the 2 months before get a little bit hectic. The big difference this year is, in previous years, I was doing all this in addition to my full-time job. But last December, I was involved in a lovely layoff, and I had to ask myself that hard question, which was, after 9 years of promoting, was it time to hang up the hat or go all in? And so I've chosen to go all in. Nice. And it's amazing how many hours you can put into something and still feel like there's not enough time.
Right. Dude, I feel that every single day. But I'm glad that you chose to stay or go all in and not stop promoting OSG, because it's hands down the premier show. I mean, especially for weight class athletes. I mean, everybody looks forward to OSG every single year. And of course, the heavyweights get their invite to Giants Live. So yeah, man, I don't know what we'd do without OSG.
Well, what people don't realize is, this has allowed me to, have a little bit more time to improve the official Strongman website. If you're a member there, you might be noticing these subtle improvements. We've now got PayPal as an option for payment, and we're improving how the videos are. So, it's not just more time for one competition. It's also allowing me to put a little more focus on the regional qualifiers throughout the year. So good things are coming. I'm entering into sort of a different level of, we'll say, quote unquote, professionalism with promoting that I think a lot of people can't do just because they are gym owners. They have other responsibilities. And the biggest thing I noticed was just on a Tuesday, I could drive to a destination or fly to a destination, go tour the facility.
Right.
And that has been a little bit of a game changer as far as where we are this year, going to be at the Charleston Coliseum in West Virginia. Amazing venue. Wouldn't have ever had the opportunity to really think about other locations other than just what is on I-95 close to me until we did this. So no, good things are coming because of it. It is the most stressful year of my life, and I'm including like the first year of my children being born, that was the lack of sleep. This is a different type of stress.
Right. This is a whole other baby experience, I imagine, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I lost my train of thought here. I had a question for you.
I was hoping so, because I'm going into this blind, so I'm ready for whatever you got.
So we don't typically come in with like canned questions or anything. Yeah. We're just kind of like we talk organically and let the conversation go wherever it goes. And so because we kind of find that when you come in with canned questions, if your guest isn't prepared to answer, we might get a couple word response, and then pretty soon you're out of questions anyway, right? So,
exactly.
But yeah, man, I mean, I think it's amazing. So what I was going to say is, I don't think a lot of people realize how difficult it is to promote, like, and how much time and effort it actually takes to put on a really great show, to raise the money, to get the equipment, organize the people, the volunteers, and having that ability to do that full time is definitely a step up from what most people experience, having full-time careers on top of it.
Well, yeah. And, every contest has its own challenges. I've got the luxury of, I've been promoting competition since 2013. And I kind of, tell the story of, I've been competing for a number of years before then. And I remember I finally won my first competition as a 231. And I was looking around and I was like, wait a second, this isn't the world's strongest man. I watched, this is in the back alley of a gym instead of even in it. We were absolutely second-class citizens. And I went and said, I think I can do better. And I had some friends that were training strongman with me, hence where Train Strongman as a company name came up.
Sure.
Who wrote it on the whiteboard so that I could, and I said, it shouldn't be that hard to be better, but 10 years later, I have been able to make the investments, because the first 9 years, I literally didn't take out a cent, and most years lost money. And I had the luxury, because I had the full-time career, and a good career, 20 years of, in the web software industry. So it allowed me to accumulate enough equipment to run things more efficiently. I think back to my very first contest where I was expecting 40 athletes and 84 showed up, and I was scrambling to add another lane, because when I was using my Excel formulas on how long things are going to take, it wasn't good. So I needed to fix that. And, that's kind of continued to this day. One thing that we do kind of reach, and I actually enjoyed this part of the conversation you had with Derek Owens on a podcast. And, he's a great promoter that I'm really proud to continue to work with, because he takes feedback and he makes improvements, and he's very committed to the athletes and the growth of the sport. But one of the things was about, kind of how many lanes is too many lanes. And you guys may or may not remember, but in like 2018, we were doing 5 lanes at a time. And I remember the sandbag toss with 5 lanes, and it was utter chaos. The MC doesn't know what's going on. The crowd can't really pay attention well. And when we switched it to 2 lanes head to head, all of a sudden you were watching in sync, and just the experience got so much better. So I've actually taken that back step to only a max of 4, just because I am realizing that from an efficiency standpoint, there actually starts to be diminishing returns where the reset ends up taking a little bit longer. You end up with it also just being a more confusing experience. A pet peeve of mine, when live streams have too much crap on the screen, You know, the more names you've got on there, or, you know, just if they're really big front and center, that annoys me. But, you know, trying to now get to the point where I could run 10 lanes at a time, but it would be horrible for these other audiences. And over 10 years, you now go and think with OSG, it's like we no longer have a challenge of getting the right athletes there. Everyone wants to be there because they recognize the caliber of the production, the caliber of the competition, the exposure that you get. And now it's, how do we focus a little bit on some of these other audiences that will help the sport grow? You know, the spectators, the live stream viewers. I was pretty embarrassed when I was putting together our VIP tickets this year that I really had no content to talk about the experience as a spectator. There weren't even any real photos or video content. It wasn't a focus. I was so focused on delivering, you know, and last year was a little bit of an exception. That was just please survive, get it done, you know, that kind of thing.
Right.
But in general, you end up focusing a little bit too much on just the competition being successful, that you forget about hopefully all the friends and family and just strongman fans that are also participating in this. So it's been a fun 10 years of promoting, and now with full-time effort, you do allow yourself to start thinking about these other audiences that you're serving.
Right. I think it's interesting that you mentioned the too many lanes thing, because I know, I mean, we've seen other competitions, like you said, with the 10 lanes, and it's chaotic for the athletes and very chaotic, I think, from a spectator perspective. It's so hard to follow, especially when you get, you know, I don't think OSG, you control where the athletes are, not on the field during competition, right? But you have these competitions where all the athletes are outstanding in around the event too, right? And it's just a massive chaos. So yeah, I think it's interesting that you pointed out that 2 lanes is pretty optimal for, because I mean, I tend to agree. You know, as we've seen,
it's a careful balance, though. Sure. You know, a good example, and you know, to be clear, there's a difference between 10 separate competitions going simultaneous,
sure,
versus 10 lanes head to head. I think 10 lanes head to head is utter chaos because you have to pay attention to all 10. 10 separate competitions, you know, it is what it is. I don't think it grows the sport personally. I think it allows you to watch your favorite athlete. And in this friends and family world, that actually is an efficient way to handle a large number of athletes. I do look at other sports, and, you know, the CrossFit Games is an example where they do 10 at a time. Yep. And there are a few events where that actually kind of works. And I think it's those zoomed out race events where you can take advantage of the field. If you're counting reps, it's not going to work. And so there's just things to think on with that. But yeah, just a distinction, you know, in 2017, we had different classes going at the same time. And the resounding feedback was, you know, I don't know what's going on. And so that was the number one thing to fix, was running everything head to head. That really improved the experience for not just the viewer, also the athlete. You know when you're going. You're able to cheer on your friend. The whole strongman community, when you're stuck in a curtained off lane for the whole day and you can't even cheer on your friend, kind of bothers me, because that's not what, you know, brought me into this sport. I always came into, it's my favorite thing about the amateurs is you train with your friends and you all go to the same competition. When I'm at World's Strongest Man talking with some of the heavyweight pros, that's some of the things that they miss, is they don't have the training community all training for World's Strongest Man.
Sure.
Because there's so few of them. They actually have to drive and then meet up with someone. But, you know, you lose some of that. And that is, frankly, one of the challenges I have with OSG is, how do I maintain something that I really enjoy, which is what we're experiencing right now, where regardless of country, weight class, you start seeing everyone training on this damn yoke press or the damn block, and they're like, oh my God, it sucks for everyone. This is awesome, you know?
Yeah. I started training with a cambered bar, and I've learned to hate it very quickly. And, yeah, it's like, it just knocks like, I don't know, 80 pounds off my press. It's stupid.
that yoke press is a real challenge. And
Yeah.
I'm still, to be perfectly honest, I'm still trying to finalize basically some rules on that one in particular around safety.
Yeah.
First and foremost, you know, making sure that the top of the crossbar can't be any higher than your collarbone so that people don't lose teeth.
Sure.
You know, that's first and foremost. The implement's also designed so that it absorbs that smash back that people are experiencing. But I have seen that, and I believe some of it is due to the weights in training are a little bit lighter than what will be in competition. You're also a little more fresh. And so people are actually beating the swing with their press, and then they're considering a good command because their body's rigid and they actually haven't taken that initial swing. And it kind of defeats the purpose. And so we're trying to go and say, all right, now is that a factor of just the fact that they're training light weights right now? Because I can tell you once you go heavier, you no longer beat that swing.
Right.
Is it a problem with the thrusting out of the bottom where, you know, do we have to take that away? Those are things that I'm still kind of resolving. And I always tell people, you know, until the rules are out there, you know, you just got to get stronger and more familiar with the implement.
Absolutely.
But if just like a Viking press, if the Viking press says that you have to stand up with it and then press, then stand up with it in the press.
Right. So to be clear, you're considering not allowing a thruster press on the yoke?
Yeah, basically what I'm seeing with that is that people are able to get their body rigid before the actual swing back. And my balance is, do I make it so that I'm discussing with judges a slightly different way of saying what's a good rep, which is you have to at least absorb that first swing back a little bit, you know, and it starts to get a little bit subjective, which I don't like. And so I know for a fact that it's less of a swing when people actually pick it up first
and let it settle.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because they're coming in at an angle. And so these are things I'm kind of working out. And it's because, you know, what we're trying to test here. I don't want it where it's still at a 45-degree angle swung forward, but you think it's a good lockout because you're rigid.
Right.
And then you slam it down and it hits back at you. If you actually do this properly, it doesn't hit back at you if you're successful because you held it and the swing goes. Where people get smacked in the face is failures or they're rushing the rep.
Yep.
And it's still to be determined whether I'm going to, you know, make an adjustment on the thruster on there. I have another question for, you know, we're looking at consistency with Giants Live, with World's Strongest Man, have all the same rules. It just doesn't make sense to have rules that you do for amateurs that you don't do on the way up.
100%.
And one of those was, hey, for the Flintstone press in 2022, you allowed behind the neck jerks because it was from a rack. Are we going to allow that for the yoke press? So these are still things that we're trying to finalize. Okay. Do we allow someone to drop an implement behind them because it's a progression? Believe it or not, in a lot of these larger heavyweight pro shows, they just don't care.
Yeah, I've seen that.
And that was actually.
I don't think you want to drop the yoke behind you. that would be. You know, that would be. I think that could turn out to be a big mistake.
It's certainly risky. One of the things around that really shocked me, and it was sometimes you don't realize these biases or just things that you believe to be true, and then someone points it out, and you're like, "Oh my God, that's just something I've always believed, but it's not actually true.
Right.
And the dropping of implements, that whole you must control it down, that started because our equipment was crappily made and we were on concrete.
Right. Right. And we only had one of each implement too, right? So if that 100%. One got destroyed, yeah.
and you start thinking about a professional organization where you have safe quality equipment with padding on the floors and all that. And you're like, you know what? It's more important for the athlete to properly feel like they can bail at any moment.
Yeah.
And the circus dumbbell is a prime example. Just drop that from overhead, then trying to bring it to your shoulder down under control and things like that.
Yeah.
It really was a big realization when I was like, oh, that's just because I've been competing for 17 years in places where you break the floor, you have crappy equipment that's going to break. And it's like, that's not actually necessary right now. So that's just one of those examples.
That's awesome. And I love that you're thinking about safety. We've talked about safety many times on here, because talking about some of the amateur shows and, safety is often overlooked, not considered at all. And it's really nice to hear. It's refreshing to hear you talk about safety and making sure the athletes are safe. And I think dropping implements is kind of a safe move, right? And you, even in like Olympic lifting, the only control usually is they've got to follow it down. It can't roll off the platform. Right. Yeah. I mean, granted, they're using bumper plates, but
one of the other things, just jumping onto that press medley, I wanted to do a block press because I hadn't done it. And there's a reason it's at the end. And that reason is 100% safety. That is not a piece of equipment to rush. Right. And I keep telling people that when you get onto your fourth implement, that's the final implement. When you go and press that, hold it for photos. There's no reason to quickly bail. Enjoy that moment.
Right.
And it was designed that way so that you don't have to just toss it quickly and then move on to the next.
Right.
It'll bounce like a football. That is a dangerous piece of equipment. I think it's only safe when it's for a single rep and there's no rushing to the next one. And so I've designed it with this ladder where it's the final. Everyone, it's still dangerous. It's going to be scary, but at that stage, you should be focusing on get this solid rep, not, oh, I got to run to the next thing.
Right. Yeah. I was just talking to Isaac Mays before we jumped on here because he was doing block presses and it was bouncing all over the place. And I'm like, don't do a Gary Petrosky. I don't know if you remember that. It was a couple years ago. Yeah. You about lost a toe.
Strongman is dangerous. We have to keep that in mind.
Absolutely.
And I also am a firm believer of strongman needs to look cool still. In the war against standardization, I lean a little more towards keep it weird.
Yeah.
I try to balance, like with the car walks I designed, they were essentially yokes. So there's some standardization for your training and whatnot. But it's still keeping strongman cool to watch and weird.
Yeah, no, I think most people get into strongman because they like the odd objects and we have an unlimited number of events at this point and variability, which is cool. Which kind of goes back to what you said earlier. It's less about specialization and just showing up strong, right? I think our argument on this show a lot of times with standardization is really directed specifically at world records where we can, where there's something to compare to, because we all know that like a 10-inch log is much different than a 13-inch log. A rotating axle is different than a non-rotating axle, so on and so forth. Or, when it comes to stones, if you can make a 400-pound 18-inch stone, it's going to be a lot easier than a 22, right?
100%.
Yeah. So that's what we've always kind of aimed at in making sure that if we're setting world records, that there's some verification of the weight, because we've got strongman as a worldwide sport and people are setting world records all over the place. And my thoughts have always been that when it comes to world records, we should be having some standard in place where weights are verified for world records at the very least.
Yeah, I mean, there needs a little bit of oversight to something like that, and it's going to require someone to take ownership of the record keeping. And I know there's a number of people that are working towards that.
Right.
And
our good friend Luke Davis does a great job.
Yeah, absolutely. For as far as the record keeping goes, I think there's the other thought, which is providing the opportunity in a fair playing field as well. We saw an example where, world records were set, but people that really could have challenged those weren't necessarily there.
Right.
And it wasn't there because they couldn't be. It was because it was an invite based.
Right.
So, world records are a tricky thing for me. I have a unique stance where I'm able to also see where the traffic comes in on things like the 505 deadlift attempts for Giants Live get a massive surge of traffic. People really want to see world records, but it's actually not my favorite, because I think that once you start taking world records out of the context of a competition, it's a specialist kind of field. Mm-hmm. And that's where you end up with athletes that aren't actually great strongmen, but they're physically just optimized. You see this in powerlifting, where, just longest arms in the world, shortest legs. There's things you can optimize to the point. And I don't necessarily want to see that in strongman. It would be such a shame for like the Atlas Stone world record to not go to a strongman like Tom Stoltman. And it just goes to someone who could never even compete on a level with Tom, like someone who just optimized. That would be a bit of a shame for me.
No, I agree with you. And we've had that conversation several times on the show too, is, I think it's always more impressive when a world record is set in a full competition, right? I mean, like, Nick Kamey's axle world record, he did it after 3 days of competition, right? After everything was over, and smoked just a huge axle world record. Like, that's hands down, one of the most impressive world records I've ever seen in this world strongman, right?
The combination also of that particular equipment, I know for a fact that was one of the highest level fixed axles that we have in the U.S.
Yeah. Oh crap! His name is Johnny Wazico. How do you say his last name?
I say it wrong.
I say it wrong too.
I pronounce everything wrong, but I believe that was his weights and axle setup.
Yeah, it was 100%. It was his, and this is driving me nuts that the name is escaping me. Great strongman, has won America's like 5 times in a row.
Like Zach?
You win a fight. Yeah, Zach McCarley. Thank you. So Zach came and tried that too, to go after the world record. And it was remarkable to see. I mean, and we know that Zach's a great strongman, by all means. I mean, he's done some incredible feats in his heyday, and he really struggled to clean it. That was I think if he could have cleaned it, he would have definitely pressed the world record. But there's such a difference with a fixed axle that, I mean, it kind of goes back to what I was saying with world records, that some little bit of standardization should be there. And I'm a big fan of, if it's been set on a fixed axle, it should be on a fixed axle moving forward, because that's the hardest level of pressing or cleaning.
100%. And, I'll pick on myself. Like the axles I've used at OSG that were fixed axles, only the initial thick wagon wheel, which gets it to maybe, I think it was 281 or 251 pounds, only that was fixed. And then it was just weights. So the axle that, Nicholas Canby went and used, absolutely everything down to like the change plate was fixed. I loved it.
Yeah. Yeah, it was an amazing feat. And again, I mean, I can't say enough good things about Nick's performance that day. I was fortunate to be there to watch it. It was absolutely insane. But yeah, I mean, getting back to, I've always kind of, I don't know, I sway a little bit back and forth. Like absolutely world record setting competition are by far the most impressive all day, every single day. But, I think the cream still rises to the top. And a lot of our world record holders are top strongmen. I mean, just looking at Iron Bibi, right? I mean, he's not an amateur by any means. And he's got some world records. Big Z was holding world records for a long time. I think a lot of those were set in competition, but they have the World Log Lift Championship. So I think strongman, my perspective, I think strongman needs the world records. I think it advances the sport a bit, but yeah, I would love to see him set in competition any day over standalone events.
Well, the reality is the reason why our records are primarily strongmen is that those are the athletes that are trying.
Right.
If all of a sudden you had 100,000 for an axle clean and press world record, a weightlifter would come in if
Right.
it wasn't a fixed axle,
right,
and they would absolutely take that.
Right.
Right now, there's not enough incentive to go poach all of strongman's
Sure.
world records. Where I do think that some sports, there probably are people that could jump in and take some of those individual ones.
Absolutely.
Because they specialize. So yeah, we'll see as it grows. I definitely, the interest, because I can see that spike of traffic. People love a world record. They really do. The challenge is, how do you do a world record in a competition where it's not a smaller competition? And these are the
Right.
struggles I have, where I'm trying to grow the sport in a slightly different way than some of the other competitions out there, where I really am trying to keep this level playing field, this sense of equality across men and women,
Sure.
across prize money. And I tell people all the time, I could have 1,000 athletes at OSG if I wanted. It could be
Absolutely
7-8
could.
days long. We could do any of that. It just would be a worse experience for the people who have been there in the past.
Right.
So I only grow when I believe that I can do it without reducing the quality for the athletes that have been there, competing already.
Right. No, and that's great. I mean, as I've been competing now for 15 years, and I've definitely spent far, far more money than I've won. So I think it's probably the experience for most athletes. And yeah, it's important to have a good athlete experience, because at the end of the day, we're all paying quite a lot of money to travel, and entry fees and everything else. So yeah, it's great that you focus on that it's.
I have a question for you guys. So I actually just got back from a large sports tourism conference, and it was pretty crazy. I got to speak with 50 different destinations over the course of the week. And, there's the opportunity, because there's interest in strongman. Strongman is cool. When you think about what you're willing to do as an athlete, and you do realize that most of the athletes, they are using their vacation time. They are treating this
100%.
like a vacation because of the cost. So they can't do this very often. Does the destination matter to you? Would you be happier? And we'll frame this in a couple ways: being outdoors versus in an arena, or being at a destination that unanimously everyone would want to go to because it's a bucket list item, or someplace that was cheaper hotels?
Man, that is a loaded question. Because my favorite competitions are when I've traveled overseas by far. But the destinations themselves aren't necessarily like anything great. SCL, I did one in a little tiny town in a parking lot of a supermarket, which was a fantastic competition. Did another one out in front of a gym in a street, but it was great. For me, like doing like when Clash on the Coast first came out, being on the beach was amazing. So there is a little bit to the destination, I think. But I'm also for myself, I'm a bargain shopper when I travel because it's expensive, right? And so like I'm staying at the one of the host hotels this year, but there's been many times that I go and find a cheap Airbnb because it's just outside of my range of my budget. So I think there's got to be a good balance, because if we go all in, for I think a lot of athletes, if you go all in on the destination, where price isn't really a consideration, it becomes almost too burdensome. Whereas, if there's a decent location and the pricing is more modest, I think that's, like I said, it's a hard question to answer because, yeah, man, I would love to go to like the greatest destinations if I could afford it, right? If money wasn't an issue, by all means, all day, every day. But because money is an issue, I think there's got to be a good balance, honestly. And as far as indoor outdoor goes, I love outdoor competitions. I really do. But when weather's unpredictable, you wish you're inside, right?
Yeah.
It's a tough question to answer.
Yeah. What about you, John?
So it's kind of a balance, I think. I think indoors, you can control the variables a lot more, especially now in the age of live streaming. How many outdoor venues or competitions I've seen where like banners are falling over. There's all these things you didn't expect. The weather looks amazing, but there's the winds just like destroying everything, makes audio quality a bit weird with the mics. So I think indoors always safer because yes, it does look cool if you have optimal weather outside. That's great. But I also think the pricing can be a bit of an issue. Like I think all of us would say that like it would be really cool to go to like Hawaii or like one
Tahiti,
of like
man.
Yeah, Tahiti, Turks and Caicos, something like that. But I think, and this is going to be a brief aside, but oftentimes in strongman there's a very negative stigma to like GoFundMe's and things to help people get there, but there is a portion of athletes who do not have the funds to get there. And like Darren's mentioned before, kind of the joke of sometimes it seems like rich man versus strong man, because it is this idea of at the end of the day, you want somewhere that's central enough that you can get a large pool of athletes, because unless you're like paying for athletes to come out there, there is a portion of people, especially a great example, good friend of the show, CJ Pierce. Like if you're a teacher, you can't fly overseas very often. Like you could maybe do it once a year, and some teachers can't do that. So I think you have to kind of balance those things, because at the end of the day, you'll see some of these, I wouldn't call them necessarily destination competitions, but some of them don't have the same talent pool. So I think it's kind of everything kind of in moderation, but it's one of those things that at the end of the day, you want to think how many variables can you control, which I would say indoors always makes a bit more sense, but also locations that you want it to be a fun place where there is stuff going on around it, because you don't want to just be like, oh, we're in this warehouse 50 miles outside of a town. It was amazing. The arena looks great, but like nothing's nearby. There isn't anything to do because people are bringing their families. So I think it's a delicate balance of like, I think, and oftentimes it seems like OSG's done a decent job about it, because it is, at the end of the day, you want it to be athlete centric. You don't want to overshadow the athletes with the venue or the location too much. So I think it goes back and forth, because at the end of the day, it is a lot of other sports. You do have GoFundMe's, you have communities getting athletes there and stuff. And sometimes, especially in our sport, for some reason, we frown on that severely. But for many people, it is going to be, especially, I think this is a brief aside about your thing with the equipment. Well, it is great when strongman has these like wacky events, as our friend Mark Deadliest Lift would say. It's great, but you still want them to be based on something that people could do in their own gym. Yeah. So it's like one of those things, if you want to make it a cool place where families can do things afterwards, and everything, but you want it affordable enough that you're going to have a good athlete pool. Because at the end of the day, going to Turks and Caicos for a strongman competition or like somewhere in the Mediterranean, it would be dope, but how many people are you going to get there? So it's always kind of a balance, but I think at the end of the day, you want to do what's best for the athletes and to make it a fun experience for them all around, not just focusing on like, I've seen competitions where they're like, this venue is amazing, it's outside, but there are those things of thinking of like cleaning a log in the hot sun, depending on where you are, like you're going to need sunglasses or just get blinded. So you have to think about every single element, which is hard for a lot of promoters, especially if, like you said, when you have a day job, so many people, they prepare a year in advance, but that's because they only have 51 weekends to prepare, or they might sacrifice their evenings. So,
did you watch World's Strongest Man 2022 in Sacramento, where the deadlift, if you wore socks, some of them had to actually just stop at the third bar and run off to the side because they physically couldn't go on because of the surface conditions.
Yeah.
So there, and that I would say was relatively good weather when you think of all the things that could have happened.
Right.
One of the reasons I bring that up, though, is, if I go back to that vision of bringing the World's Strongest Man experience to the weight classes and the women, that concept of if all of a sudden World's Strongest, man for the weight classes was no longer in the U.S., if OSG had the ability to travel because 45% of the athletes aren't from the United States, how many of those American athletes have a passport? How many of them would be able to handle the additional, flight costs? It's something I really struggle with because I've seen with other countries, in many ways, a lot more support from the governing bodies. And in the U.S., we kind of have a unique situation with our governing bodies for strongman that I'm never going to get into. But, it's one of those where even though I think that should happen at some stage, I don't think right now we could support it. And so, that's something to think about where it's not even the destination. It's just the fact that it's outside the country. The number of Americans that don't have a passport, I mean, shoot, I was certainly one of them where I never really thought I was going to be traveling abroad until a number of years ago. But another option is realizing that if you ever watched the IFSA competitions way back in the day, those were mostly indoors.
Right.
You can't tell where they are. And you really almost can't even tell what year they are. Whereas with
Right.
World's Strongest Man, I remember Sun City, South Africa. I remember Botswana, all these kinds of things. And as I'm learning from this being a full-time endeavor now, that benefit towards the destination allows them to start assisting with the costs. Right now, we're going into strongman where we are relying on sponsors, spectators, athlete entry fees to pay for this because we don't deliver enough value in other ways.
Right.
It's something that I'm trying to change, and it's something that where you do think about some of these outdoor venues. If you can showcase the destination more, there's assistance there, and it's like.
Sure.
If we went to something, now throw out crazy places like the Bahamas, right? Or Hawaii, as you mentioned. Hawaii's a little different because I feel like the Bahamas, closer to Europe, helps more of those athletes and has almost that equal bucket list appeal.
Yeah.
The only difference is that Americans don't need a passport for Hawaii. But just either of those in your mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
Say, all right, that's more expensive to get to. But what if all of a sudden the destination, because you have to stay at the host hotel, the destination starts contributing, that all of a sudden, miraculously, the entry fee's gone for the athlete.
That would be amazing.
There's this balance where it's like, oh shit, the hotel's expensive and I have to be there, but we just dropped this cost,
right?
Because we know you're going to be there and the destination can serve. So there's different ways of thinking about it, but it's always interesting when I ask people, because everyone would love to do the traveling internationally.
100%.
The realization of, well, you're going to lose a very good part of the population, and it always hurts when, and it still happens, when you lose a very quality athlete because they simply can't afford it.
Yep.
You lose it because they're in school and they can't leave. They have a job, they can't leave. About the only time I'm happy when someone can't compete is, when there's, a child or something that
right.
positive to it.
Sure.
But, those are the things that I'm now thinking about is how do we go beyond, where can money come from and where can we start to reduce the cost from the athlete and have it coming from other sources. I kind of exclude sponsors right out of the gate because I give 100% of every sponsor dollar to the athletes. So if I think about what's going to provide this production quality, it's spectators for one. And then if we can get assistance from the destination, that's something that I'm certainly being more and more interested into discovering. And so indoor venues, you don't know where it is. That's the old IFSA. Go watch some of those. You'll never place the year or the location.
That's a great point. I've watched all the IFSA and I never really thought about that, but you're right. World's Strongest Man and SCL, both, they always, their destinations, they take a lot of time. They film the area. They take their athletes out to mingle with the locals, right? And you're right, they're supporting the location itself. And I guess I never considered that they were getting any financial support back, but why wouldn't they?
If you provide value, it's worth something. And,
right.
It's just something to consider. And these are the things that are now going through my head that honestly, a year ago, I wouldn't have been able to do because I just didn't have enough bandwidth to go beyond just making it the best experience it can be for the athlete. Now you start to have some of these, plans that maybe are a 5 to 10 year plan out, even though we're already 10 years in.
Right.
I think that's key, especially thinking of, I like what you said about making the website better for the official strongman, but also like those mini documentaries and getting out like the good content on YouTube, of thinking alternate revenue streams that can help fund these events so that eventually less comes from the athletes, because you also want it to be one of those things that like showcasing the location, because I think not enough people, we talk about it all the time, like SEL and other places, they'll like consistently interviewing athletes, showing the area, showing all these things. And sometimes it feels like far too many competitions are really just like, you have 8 to 10 lanes going. You're essentially only following the people you actually care about. There isn't like a storyline, when in fact, part of what makes things great is like the World's Strongest Man under U80 documentary that came out like earlier this year or last year. Like those are really great pieces of like material that people love. Like, and to have like thousands of people watching an hour-long, really well cut up thing is nice, because it's a delicate balance, because everyone loves live streams these days, but there is a portion of people who, sometimes even Darren, will be like, I'm not going to watch 10 hours of something. I just physically don't have the time for it. But these little cut down things for the weight classes to make them, it is about the athletes. They are the stars. So I like that idea you said of making it World's Strongest Man for weight class athletes, because you do want to have like the drama and excitement there. That's why people love like the NFL and things. They're characters. They're people you can get invested in. And sometimes it feels like with some of our national level shows and stuff, like Darren says, like sponsors, no one's going to actually see what's on the shirts. No one's going to be able to pay attention to anything. Like it's all so much going on that essentially you're just there for a handful of people and not there for the actual concept of the event itself. So I think that's a good point.
So, the live stream versus cut up is something that, has been on my mind for a while. And I would say, I don't know, maybe ADL coined it or it's somewhere else, but it's only live once. I really do like that, because if you watch this sport live with other people around, and that can be in person or through a watch party and things like that, it is incredible. And you do lose that a little bit on the replays because you lost the drama component. There's no comeback story, or any of that kind of thing, unless it gets built up. And Joe Schofield did a great job in the 80s documentary. I wish we had 12 of them so we would have all divisions covered. But it's another problem where that is a step in the direction that he wants to take it. And frankly, I have been a huge supporter of that. And that is just also another audience. The beauty of that particular documentary, in my opinion, was I actually sent that link to my family, and they watched it. And I have had my mother in watching live competitions, actually only one, and she cringed. She was afraid for people's lives and all this things. So she's not a live viewer for that. But she actually watched it because of the stories. I believe that strongman absolutely is one of the most fun sports to watch in the world. I'll put, watching strongman, rep out a car deadlift, which is probably our highest rep event, over double unders on CrossFit any day. Or when they're on the bike and you're like, how many miles?
Those assault bike ones.
How long do I have to watch you in a stationary position?
Exactly. I think that our content is amazing. Mm-hmm. Everyone I talk to, once they actually put the connection of, that thing where they lift rocks and pull planes, they're like, I have memories that are fond of this because it is such a visual thing. And the characters are great. And I've been pitching this concept that we have those characters across every single division. Without a doubt, I could give you 3 to 5 people in any single division to watch, and we can make a story around it. And frankly, that's something that I'm moving towards as an alternative. When you think about, okay, where does strongman actually break into that, $1 million plus? You either have to be rich on your own from something else, or what are these ideas? And one of those, I believe, is the content that we could generate from these incredible athletes across all the divisions.
Right. I think that's key, like that fusion of, because the live stream is fun. Like, it's been great to watch some of the ones like OSG regionals and everything. It was great being able to like message John Stacy, who's doing commentary, and just like you would check it during breaks, and like you could give live feedback. But also for athletes, it's really great to like be able to see, like, look at this was amazing, and like have that real time interaction rather than like waiting months down the road. Because that's also the strange thing, that for some reason, some of the larger shows, sometimes there is this idea that like it's either one or the other. You have a live stream or you have a show that's put out months later. And it's like, there can be both. Like Rogue with the Rogue Invitational does a great job of streams all day, and then it's cut up later for like the events and stuff. So I think it's really neat seeing that like combination, because it is neat seeing these athletes, to watch your friends do something in real time. And if you can't be there, to still be a part of it is huge.
That concept of one or the other, you don't actually have to choose. One of the things I'm attempting this year that's new is potentially having a side broadcast that is from the experience OSG standpoint. Because yes, watching the competition is excellent. There is a paywall behind that, and it's just watching the competition. But sometimes it's really cool to just watch the fan experience. And World's Strongest Man, they've started to build that in, where there is a little bit of that fan experience that's live. I think there's still progress in that direction. And that's something that I'm going to be making an attempt to go and say, hey, rather than just it's either you watch the live stream or you're not involved, have something where, ooh, I can actually see this is pretty cool. This is pretty crazy. Look at, the interaction there. Maybe they give a couple of spoilers, but nothing too crazy. It's just a tease at what you want. And I do think about it was the very first Shaw Classic where it was just one day late and it was cut up. And it was amazing how that kind of lost something. Just one day, all the spoilers were out, and because it was cut up quickly, you almost didn't get to revel in any of the good performances or the bad, because you were immediately on to the next thing. We find it with OSG where we need to slow it down where we can, because even on the commentary, they're still talking because that was amazing. Don't bring up the next people yet. So a little bit of that coordination and thinking about that viewing experience instead of just how do we run this efficient contest, get everyone out.
Right. Yeah. We talked here a while back with Joe and Yanni from Gym Life Media and
Strong Personalities. And we were kind of ranking all the big competitions. And I was like, the only one that was like, I think World's Strongest Man stands well. Still, I mean, they're the first ones to do it. They're still doing what they've always done. While other competitions have come and gone, they're still here, still doing what they do. I agree. I think the live aspect needs to be captured a bit more, but still, I mean, people are so in tune with World's Strongest Man, and they still watch. Like, I've watched all of the World's Strongest Mans multiple times because it's a great product at the end of the day. So I think there's a tremendous value still in that edited, released version. But yeah, I'm with you that the live experience is still really important. And we all know the outcome of World's Strongest Man, even though it's not filmed live, right? We're following on spreadsheets, and all the forums and the socials are like alive with, what's going on. So we get sort of a live experience. It's a little delayed, but people, are out there making the effort to share that information, and it's exciting. But it's still exciting to go back and actually live it. Visually watching the athletes actually perform too. So, and in a condensed version.
You know what was a shocker to me? The UK, their production in Christmas time includes the Giants Live tour. So where we just get the heats in the final, they actually get, here's, 60 athletes or 50 athletes trying to qualify, and they hit on those personalities. So you get them when they qualify, then you get them in the heats, and they made it to there's just more story. And I'm jealous. I would have loved that because whenever I could catch it on television, I watched it. And I think that's how a lot of people are. When they had the DVDs, I had the 30 Years of Pain. I had even Giants Live had DVDs at times. And then even before then, I had the old cable recording part on my computer. So I actually recorded it whenever it would show up on the TV guide things. I was pretty nerdy with all this.
I'm pretty sure that I have VHS of IFSA somewhere.
Yeah.
I like that though, that concept that it's not, you don't have to choose one or the other of you can have the full experience, because it is, I think, the best part, and part of why sometimes we talk about standardizing equipment, but usually it's the thing we're not necessarily a fan of is huge apparatuses that just overshadow the athlete and everything. But it is neat to have those fun things, because you do want to have it be something that people watch and actually get invested in, because people, I think it's really neat that a lot of shows these days have started, like, you can buy shirts with your athlete's name on the back and stuff. Like, I have Nick Meyer shirt, like I've had other shirts, and it makes a big difference of, like, if you feel like you're involved in these people as athletes, because it is amazing to hear the stories. Like, it's great watching like CJ Pierce to be like, this guy's like the world's strongest teacher, just doing these like insane things and like getting to know people as people, which kind of part of why Darren and I wanted to do this show is like getting more people involved, of being able to like help that media presence for like athletes and stuff. Like, it's amazing how many athletes you'll see their first podcast appearance is kind of awkward, a little bit like stiff, and then
I mean, if we're honest, we were awkward and stiff on our first episode.
Oh, if you watch that first one, it's amazing to watch Darren do the intro to it. Like, it seems like so long ago. So that's a neat part of getting to see like that evolution there, because everything's iterative and stuff. Like, you do software and I work as a software developer. Like, the best products are the ones that you iterate on and stuff. So I think
that's just it. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I think that's the part that's hard for a lot of hardcore strongman fans and athletes to recognize, is that, I'm nerding out a little bit with the old agile triangle of, you have quality, time, or scope, and you can pick two. So if you think about what you're capable of doing, and I run into this at OSG, it has a fixed time. So then I have either the quality of what I'm doing or scope, meaning how many things I'm doing. I have to choose one of those things. So when we think about the growth of the sport, you think about, we need more prize money. Yes. We also need more divisions to give opportunity for X, Y, and Z. Yes. How do we make the little steps? Because it almost frustrates me that when you think about all the big productions that do deliver large prize money, for the most part, they are run by organizations or individuals that don't need this to be profitable. It's one of the things that I'm actually really proud of working with the Giants Live team, because that is kind of something that is very successful now, but started grassroots. It is successful because they delivered a product that brought thousands of people to it. It is not successful because it didn't need to make a dime, because the TV production company or whatnot, or an individual that has enough money from something else. So as we think about how we grow this, how do we grow this organically? And you try to hit what are the things that will affect that, so that we can have more opportunity for more athletes, so that we can have better prize money, and that more opportunity for more athletes takes multiple forms. It's not larger contests necessarily. I think, Darren, you would agree that your opportunity that you're seeking, and when you talk about your favorite contest, your opportunity is to have the spotlight. And so
100%.
The ability to have more contests that can have spotlight on just your class. We're not interested in just pumping things out, but we have to recognize that this is going to be an iterative process where we can say, how do we give forward direction in one or two of those things every year without gambling to the point where it just disintegrates? Because
spread too
there
thin.
are so many promoters that do this for the love, because they don't have anything else that would be a positive around it. A lot of them lose money. I was there 100%, and it's very easy to be like, the athletes need to make more money, but those promoters, their love for it will eventually fade if they can't also be effective on their goals.
100%.
And so you can't just ask for everything all at once. And I think that's where we've seen some failures in the past, where you just say, it should be this way. Well, we're just not there yet. So what step can we make in that direction? And then you stack enough of those years, and all of a sudden we're like, oh, wait a second, we're giving out this much money now? That's incredible. we have equality in these divisions. That's incredible. Our first Giants Live for females only, that's something that, just wasn't feasible just a number of years ago. But the little baby steps, I believe that OSG was one of those steps. I believe that World's Strongest Nation, having the men and women, was one of those steps. And now you can look at the data and say, there's no reason why that isn't sustainable and can grow further.
I think that's huge and everything, because you do need to have those steps to build up to, because it is, I think oftentimes you make a great point of a lot of promoters do this out of love. And I think people can have this such high level of expectations at time that they don't realize that hundreds and hundreds of hours went into this event. And you have sometimes people will just tear into a promoter because of one bad half hour in a long day and stuff. And it's you realize that things are iterative, and you do have to choose those things, because it is an idea of lots of prize money is great, but also you want to have a good experience, because not every athlete's going to podium. How do you make sure their experience is also great? Because Derek Owens mentioned that on his show of you want to also make sure that the overall experience is good, because at the end of the day, I think if Darren and I decided not to do this podcast until we both had headphones and both had mics and both had everything, it would have taken forever, because our first episodes is literally me talking to my MacBook with no headphones or speakers, him talking to his phone, and we're just recording Zoom calls. Yeah. And it's those little steps I think are key, because people don't often see that in the age of controversy tends to sell and everything. People tend to latch on to these negative things, because as humans, that's how we evolved, is noticing threats. So it's neat to think of that idea of iterating on things, because 100%, even a year ago, you wouldn't have thought of things like Giants Live for women and World's Strongest Nation. Those things were huge, and realizing the way that captured people's minds and attention is huge, because Darren and I say, after a while, you don't want your primary source of income to be the athletes, because the athletes should be the stars. So I think it's neat to have that experience of trying to push that to the point.
Yeah, and the only thing that I look at really is this trend, and the trend is still very positive on what I'm doing, and I try to listen to the feedback, see where I can point out failures. I really love the fact that that rep counter, that large visual. That I spent 6 months back and forth on Alibaba trying to get that all working, and to see that at Giants Live, and to see that at OSG, where all of a sudden I've empowered the MC with so much more information.
Yeah, absolutely,
it's such an incredible thing, and it's we should have had that from the beginning, but we had a lot of other things that were also important, to the point where that started to be creeping up as the next highest level thing, and I appreciate that now when I think about where are the areas to improve, they're not basic things. I mean, we're starting to, dare I say, nitpick a little bit, so that's good news.
Yeah. Next, what you need to get is the sprint laser time clocks. Right.
Already looking at it. So
nice.
With this ability to be full time, I've also been in communication with other event organizers. I'm talking to people who run Ironman, because they have the ability to have high speed streaming while remote. So if I think about outdoors, that's a thing to think on. Mm-hmm. When I think about I've got a good friend he does swimming races, and they'll bury a line in the sand, and then they'll have the little timer chip on the athlete. And it's ooh, but we have to remember that those are things that can affect our moving events only.
Right.
We still will always have this unfortunate subjective, what is a locked out, body.
Right.
I was kind of excited when I saw some of the visual analytics. One of the sponsors of the Shaw Classic was looking at for deadlift. that'd be neat if we could actually make an objective standard of what that is. I think it'll fail on the 50+ men just blatantly because they are incapable of the objective standard of a lockout elbow.
Right.
But it's 100% on my radar, and it's great that we're getting to that stage where that's the thing we need to fix. It used to be where people were just using their phones for the timers.
Sure.
Now we at least have good stopwatches.
Right. But I mean, we all know that like that time is subjected to some, timer error, like the person that's hitting that button, right? It could always be, and when you get down to like tenths, hundredths of a second can determine the difference between, 10 places, right? Yeah. You don't, and I mean, again, it's a hobby at the end of the day for the vast majority of us, and, probably shouldn't take it too seriously, but those little things I think will add a lot of value for the athlete experience to know that their times are exactly what their time is, right? There's no timer error. And we won't.
Fun, though, World's Strongest Man will have 2 or even 3 timers. I was one of them in 2022. And they will sometimes look at the average. It also makes it so that if someone was like, yeah, I was just a little bit off on that, I could tell,
Right.
And so you can remove that. So to the truck pull or the bus pull last year, I believe that legitimately was that close because I know they had multiple timers. So I put, the quote unquote blame on, unfortunately, the bus was light enough that it became how fast can you actually run. And the difference on a whole bunch of athletes who are 300 to 400 pounds for their sprinting speed evidently isn't much.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think at the highest level of competition, though, it probably makes sense when there's a lot of money on the line. Mm-hmm. Having that, using technology to its fullest makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And, when we talk about testing your equipment, truck pulls are the worst. Truck pulls and car deadlifts. I've had examples where the vehicle that you test ahead of time gets sold, and all of a sudden you get a new vehicle day of you weren't expecting.
Doesn't have as much fuel in the tank. Right?
Yeah. You have to do some either on the fly testing, or we even get a little bit creative where we just literally weigh what it is in hand, and so that we can get as close to where we thought we were going to be.
Sure.
But with truck pulls, I remember we had a dump truck, and I swear to God, one of those tires was almost flat. And I will say it was horrible, but 2 athletes out of like 100 finished it. And for those 2 athletes, the crowd was louder than it's ever been on anything. So, sometimes that's part of the drama, I think, is when, it was heavier, but it was heavier for everyone. So at least it's fair.
Exactly.
Not like something where, it got worse going on.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's always been my argument. I mean, unfortunately, at every show, there's going to be some athletes that complain because the weight's not what they thought it was going to be, or, this thing or that. And then at the end of the day, everybody just did the same exact implement, the same weight. So it's fair.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes back again to what you said earlier. Just show up strong.
That's the best. I mean, honestly, that is the best thing, I think, for strongman. I would love to get to the point where, you do start to incorporate some of this concept of mystery events or just surprises here and there. I have noticed a trend. The specs that I am being asked for are so specific, but it's because they're actually building the equipment.
Right.
Where early on, people used to ask and so that they could train with something close. Nowadays, people are literally making replicas.
Yep.
By the way, rather than buying from the sponsor, which is annoying, But they're asking for very detailed specs just to be able to go and simulate that.
Right.
I would love to do at least one surprise event and just see what happens.
Sure.
Make it safe,
Sure.
but have it be something that just tests general fitness.
Well, I think you're going to find, though, the more elite of an athlete, the less that they need to actually be training the events anyway. Because, I mean, I'm not a world champion by any means, but the older I get, the less I train the events because I've done them so many times. There's not as much benefit to me to keep, doing log press every week than just getting stronger, working on weaknesses and becoming a more well-rounded athlete. And I mean, like yoke, I stopped training yoke many years ago, and I do find that I do better actually at it in competition than I did when I was training it all the time. Because you're not going to get, I mean, maybe somebody might get better, but like I always kind of felt like the more novice athletes should probably be focusing on the events because they need to learn the form and learn, the idiosyncrasies of doing those events. But the more elite athlete you become, just show up strong. You should have most of the events well learned by now, right?
Strong and sometimes conditioned.
Yep.
I felt personally victim to the conditioning more often than the strength.
Well, we're going to find out with the Go Ruck Challenge who's conditioned and who's not.
I honestly, I think that is going to be neat because that was one of those where I just remember hearing that complaint forever, which was, well, you try doing that with, my additional weight on your body. And it's like, all of a sudden these athletes are going to have to experience what it is,
right.
But it's just a neat thing. It does, in my opinion, loop us in with other, sports, other markets, and be like, oh, wow. Here I am with the 20-pound ruck, and I thought this was hardcore. They've got 120, and they're still doing things like sprinting. It's just kind of neat. But first and foremost, it's about building bridges with these other sports. I do think that they're doing something right because, World's Strongest Man has been around for 40 years, and CrossFit's bigger. They've been around less. Rucking is been around relatively recent as well. So there's some advantages around that. Now, I'm not going to all of a sudden have us doing pickleball or something else.
Come on, man.
But I do like Highland Games. You mentioned you were getting into that. I've always been jealous of Highland Games because they could have an entire festival in the back of a pickup truck.
Yeah,
that's all the equipment that's needed.
Exactly.
There's aspects of these other sports we should pay attention to. When you look at the live productions of some of these professional sports out there, I have friends that are bigger sports fans than I am, where they watch football, they watch basketball, baseball, any of these other sports. We have so much distance to even be a mature sport when it comes to the broadcast and things like that. The fact that you guys are now doing prediction videos, I mean, you're embedded in the sport. When we can get the casual fan being able to run the numbers in their head and, creating things like fantasy football where they just have this dream. What if we did pitch Eddie Hall versus Hafthor versus Mitchell Hooper? Here's the analytics. Who would win? We have such a long way to go, and I'm not going to get stressed. I just see it as tons and tons of opportunity. We just need to make those small steps and just know that we're going in the right direction.
Yeah, right. And pickleball, another one that's just like, dude, it's just blowing up out of nowhere. I just heard about pickleball like this year. And I mean, there's already professional pickleball players making millions of dollars, right?
You would be surprised, the number of new Olympic sports that are coming in. Wow. I mean, it's just like all I see is opportunity. And it's like, I know that this is more fun to watch, but it's perceived as not as accessible to the general public.
Right.
It might be even perceived as dangerous, all these other things. And those are areas we need
Football
to
is
address.
dangerous.
It's actually, I tell people, we do so well with masters because it's functional strength. It keeps you healthy and young if you do it right. It's the people who, are their careers over at 30 in some of these other professional sports. It's like, come on, look at Mark Felix go and tell me that we're more dangerous. This is crap.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm with you 100%. And, I've said for a long time, on the same topic, that what it's going to take is a great promoter that has the time to invest. Talking about sponsorship money in and of itself, the NFL rakes in like over $14 billion a year just in endorsements, right? The money is out there. Like I would never expect Strongman to be raking in $14 billion, but $1 million is feasible, or more, right? And I'm not that promoter, but it takes a lot of effort to go out and get in front of sponsors. It takes a lot of effort, like you said. Now that you're full time, you have more time to focus on all those little things that most promoters just haven't had time to do. And so, I think there's been a lot of opportunity for a long time. It's just going to take the right person to capitalize on it.
Well, the best question you can ask is, what would I have to deliver that would be worth $1 million?
Right.
And not saying, who would give me $1 million, but saying what could I deliver that's actually worth that? And, and there are a few things that I think Strongman could deliver that's worth $1 million, and we just need to get there.
Yeah. It's exposure, I think, at the end of the day. It's all exposure to sponsors, right? They want to see an ROI, and in order to get an ROI, they need to see sales from whatever the exposure they get.
Yeah, sales, or they're introduced into an audience that's going to deliver value in a different way.
Right.
There's a number of ways to go and approach the sponsorship side of that, but we will never get there until the mass general public knows what Strongman is without the additional prodding.
Right.
And we're making great progress. Over the last 10 years, Strongman is in such a much better position than it was when I first started promoting. And then 17 years when I first started competing, it's not even a comparison you could make. So we're going in the right direction, but delivering to those sponsors is absolutely critical. We cannot have situations where we start to burn bridges with sponsors.
Right.
And that's a whole separate topic where, we've got multiple people making different connections.
Right.
And, all it takes is something that is a good experience. And then everyone is all of a sudden getting sponsorships through this organization. But it can go the other way, where there's a bad experience and then the door's closed.
Right.
And they just don't see the return. They don't see the value. So it's very critical that when you do take on a sponsorship, absolutely think about the value you're delivering and check in with them, before the event, during the event, after the event. Say, what can I do to increase the value? Are you happy with where you are right now? And even if you are happy, how can I make it even better? That's something that you'd be surprised how many sponsors don't even get talked to, by the promoter during the event, because the promoter's so busy. And I've been that person as well. I luckily had a very extroverted wife that would run around and do all that, checking in on people, giving them water. You need to care about everyone, and that plays into the volunteers as well. You can burn out a volunteer if you don't take care of them.
100%. On that note, Lynn, we're running hour and 20 minutes. My bedtime is actually in 10 minutes. It's 7:30 here. I have to get to bed so I can sleep, so I can get up in the morning to train for OSG.
All right.
So
reason.
Any final words?
I would say, just asking your followers and fans of the sport to absolutely just keep raising their hand, keep thinking about how they can go and improve the sport. And then, just maybe be a little bit easier on some of those promoters out there, because I guarantee 95+% of them are doing it for the love of the sport. And, it's kind of a thankless job, many times, because it's still not where us all as athletes want it to be. But just celebrate those small wins that we're all making, and take a moment to reflect back, 10 years and realize, oh, we've actually come a really long way.
We absolutely have. Lynn, it was wonderful having you on the show. Looking forward to seeing you in December.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Have a good evening.
We hope you enjoyed this episode, and don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and follow us on Instagram for updates. We'll catch you next time on World's Strongest Opinions.